It was, as you say, like peak Russell Crowe, and it's impossible really to imagine anybody
You ought to
else
be
in
in
that part. You know,
pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures all
everybody, and welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever by my good friend Steve, and this is Every Best Picture, where we are going through every winner of the Academy Award for Best Picture from Wings right up to the present day. This episode, we are talking Ridley Scott's Gladiator.
Hey, but before we talk Gladiator, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive, it'd be a great favor to us if you did. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ding that bell, and you'll be informed every time we drop a new video. James, I so love this movie. I rewatched it last night, and I'm toying with moving it into my top 10 of all time. I don't know if it's quite there, but I just love this film, and I was torn watching it thinking, they're going to screw up the sequel. They're going to screw it up. Please don't screw it up so bad that you ruin the first one.
Yes, eagle-eyed viewers may notice that we are doing 2000's Gladiator out of what's the word?
Out of sequence.
Out of sequence
Or order.
because Gladiator 2 is coming to cinemas just this week. So I thought, well, we're going to rewatch Gladiator anyway, so why not just jump ahead and do this as our every best picture? Yeah, this is a film that I always have held in very, very high regard, particularly because of Russell Crowe's performance. I remember thoroughly enjoying it at the cinema and have revisited it a number of times. Turned out I hadn't seen it in about 10 years, actually. And so I sat down last night to watch it as well. And I was like, yeah, this is really great. This is really sort of top tier stuff. And some of the little quibbles that I had stored in the back of my mind, that were things that I thought could have been improved or whatever, but I had given a pass to anyway, sort of weren't even really there this time round. And we'll kind of get to those, particularly in the second half of the film. But overall, I just thought, yeah, this is right. I mean, I was almost going to say this is kind of like old fashioned epic filmmaking, but it comes at a really interesting time, doesn't it? Because it is in the style of all of those old, romping epics like Spartacus or Ben-Hur. Those are clearly the films that it's emulating or evoking. But in terms of the technical side of things, this was coming at a really interesting time in Hollywood, where in the late 90s, when CGI was really showing its worth, you got films like Titanic and this film that were kind of using CGI in an unobtrusive way just to elevate the scale. And it was kind of working really, really well because the technology was there, but it's almost like the quality of the image was bad enough to kind of paper over the cracks of a still developing technology. And I think it's one of the best examples of that.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It never feels like it's a CGI-a-thon, which some films, particularly during that era, fell into, where you felt like you're watching a video game. And Gladiator steers clear of that. I just, from the onset, though, I wanted to say, I think this is probably Russell Crowe at the peak of his performances. I mean, he was the man at this point in his career. And this is probably my favorite Crowe movie. It's probably a toss-up between Gladiator and LA Confidential, which obviously he shares with Kevin Spacey and Guy Pearce. But in this one, he carries the whole load himself. So it probably falls towards Gladiator. I don't know where you want to start with this. How do we start unpacking Gladiator, James?
Yeah, that's a good question, really. I mean, I think Russell Crowe is a great place to start, actually, because he was still pretty much like the new big star on campus, as it were, at that time. You mentioned LA Confidential. That was kind of the first movie. It wasn't his first movie, and it certainly wasn't his first movie ever. But it wasn't even his first movie in Hollywood. He had done a film with like Denzel Washington a couple of years ago called Virtuosity, which is really terrible. But LA Confidential was kind of the movie where everybody really sat up and took notice and were like, who's that guy? And that did well at the Oscars. That was up against Titanic, unfortunately, that year. And in hindsight, a lot of people sort of say, oh, LA Confidential is maybe the better movie. But he was in that golden window there where he did LA Confidential and then he did The Insider with Michael Mann. And then he kind of did this and he won Best Actor and pretty resoundingly, and then went on to star in Beautiful Mind after that. It was, as you say, like peak Russell Crowe, and it's impossible really to imagine anybody else in that part. It's such it's one of those roles that really dominates the movie, like
Yeah.
sort of Cillian Murphy's character in Oppenheimer, something like that,
Yeah.
where he's not in every scene, but the entire premise of the film and the entire scope and the scale and every character arc, every part of the drama really just hangs on his shoulders. And so you've got to get it just right. It'd be really easy to go wildly over the top with a character like this, and have him be sort of just far more sort of feral or flamboyant or whatever, or at the same time have him be incredibly dull and be this kind of almost sort of super, that kind of Superman, Captain America, kind of like purer than thou, action hero where they're just so stoic that nothing bothers them. They just kind of stand there, and you'd have real problems kind of relating to them. So I think he gets it just right. The balance is right there, and there are so many sort of stirring lines of dialogue that actually, if you read them, you're like, this is really hard to sell some of this dialogue, where he's like, I'm not going to start doing impressions of Maximus now, but the lines I mean. I was like, in lesser hands, these lines are just going to sound corny as hell and unspeakable. They're not.
When he says, what we do now echoes in eternity or something like that,
Right.
it's a totally corny line, except for when Russell Crowe says it in Gladiator. And I think this is what really grounds this film. Is he is such you said he's stoic, but everything's grounded in his relationship with his wife and his son. That is what everything comes back to. And I hate kind of bringing in politics, but we're filming this or recording this a few days after Trump is going to be elected, and the world is weary of really bad leaders. We are weary of Commoduses, of Joaquin Phoenix's characters. They seem to be the ones that are ruling the world. And so watching this movie again last night, I was thinking, gosh, I would love to follow a leader like this. I would love for a leader like this to rise up, someone who's not perfect, but has a moral compass, is grounded, and it can inspire those around them to be better people. And in Russell Crowe's hands, he makes Maximus that character.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I really got those vibes as well watching it. I mean, as you say, we're recording this on Saturday morning, the week after Trump just won the election, and those early scenes when the Commodus first comes to power, and you've got those senators, you've got like Derek Jacobi and David Hemmings and whomever are sitting around and saying, this is what they're going to do. This is what he's going to do. He's going to give them 150 days of games. They don't care about the politics of it or anything. Yeah. They are just going to come for the bloodshed, and they are going to love him for it. I was just like, oh, Jesus. It was really everything that they were saying. And I do believe that, when this movie was made, they were trying to sort of throw a few little political barbs the way of who would it have been? George W. Bush.
George W.
Just come in. But I don't think even they could have possibly foreseen them landing as well as they do now, unfortunately.
Yeah, we bring up Joaquin Phoenix too, and obviously this is one of his early breakout roles. And I couldn't help but compare, having just watched Joker 2. And in this film, he's young, his body's developed. They demonstrated early in the film that despite him being a bit of a weenie, he is a master swordsman. And so he's got his shirt off and he's ripped. And I'm thinking, is this the same scrawny little guy that we saw in the Joker that looked like he was about 98 pounds? I was thinking, not only has Russell Crowe really, for 25 years, because it's been like nearly 25 years since this film came out, really established himself as one of Hollywood's A-listers. Joaquin Phoenix, this was his entry point as well.
Very much so, and and he won. He got an Oscar nomination for this as well. I remembered him being not very good actually in this, and he was actually much better than I had stored in my memory. But you're absolutely right about how when you first see him, he looks a bit kind of puffy and he looks a bit effete, and you're kind of like, okay, this guy's just like you say, a weasel. And then they have that sequence in the forest where he's training with like 4 guards and he's holding all of them at bay, he's shirtless. And you're like, oh, okay, actually, yeah, he is pretty ripped. And apparently that stuff is some of the more historically accurate stuff is that Commodus was son of Marcus Aurelius, and he did take over, and that he did start to develop this sort of cult of personality around himself. He did like to step into the arena at the Colosseum, apparently, and fight gladiators. I'm not sure. It was probably, very carefully rigged ahead of time or whatever, but he did do it. He did like to regularly sort of showboat like this. And eventually, I think he was in power a lot longer than the film implies here. Yeah. And eventually he was murdered by his own trainer, like personal trainer, a guy. I can't remember what his name was now, but a guy his personal trainer, kind of bodyguard guy, strangled him in his bed, but at the behest of the senators, by all accounts. So they've picked and chosen. I think his name was Narcissus, actually, the guard, which is kind of a great name for a personal trainer. It's like, yes, you want to look like me? Of course, everybody wants to look like me, and I don't know why he sounds like that. But yeah, so Joaquin Phoenix was better in this than I recall. He is more sinister. He is more scary. This was again, it wasn't his first film. He had done some stuff as a teenager, like sort of To Die For with Nicole Kidman and things like that. But this was definitely his kind of big breakup onto the main stage. And it's a perfect adversary because he's everything that Maximus isn't. He's got it all and he's squandering it all. He's too caught up in all of the wrong things. And what does everybody think of me? And whereas Maximus is like, I don't care about anything. I don't want any fortune and glory. I just want to go home. I want to see his wife and child. And it just reminds me it's just a throwaway comment, but it reminds me of the fact that you never see Maximus with his wife and child in the movie. There is no sequence. There's the end when they're reunited in Elysium, in the final shot of the movie. But you never he never gets home. You never see him leaving home. So that there is never a moment. There isn't even a flashback of them enjoying simpler times at home or anything like that. So you never actually see them together. And I think what's also telling, and I'm not sure how deliberate it is or whether it was just the only footage they had, but the shot at the end of his wife and son sort of seeing him coming and running towards him is a shot they've already used earlier in the movie. It's kind of like the memory he has of them, and they kind of it's flipped the other way around, but you're watching, you're like, oh, it's exactly the same piece of footage. And on the one hand, you could say, oh, well, they'd only shot it once and they decided to use it twice, so they just used the same thing twice. But it's also, I like the idea that that's his memory of them.
Yeah.
That's he recalls the last time he saw them. And so it sort of plays back in his mind exactly the same way every time, I guess. And I just thought it was a nice little touch.
Yeah. No. I think we have to mention this is Oliver Reed's final film as well. And Oliver Reed, he just does such a great supporting role. This was a fantastic swan song for him, for his career, for his life, because it's such a powerful film, and to go out on a high, in which he does. And I think, remind me, I should have probably done my research before today, but didn't he drink himself to death on this set or something like that?
Yeah, he did. They were shooting in Malta, I think it was. And he was out on a day off down in the bars. And I think he'd been there for quite some time. And as the story goes, he was just out reveling with the locals and just dropped dead. Just kind of right there. He hadn't finished shooting all of his scenes. And this was one of the things when I alluded to the fact that I remembered sort of the second half of the film being not quite so good, is that I know that they had to obviously do some hasty rewrites and, re-edits because he hadn't finished his stuff. And I remember one of my criticisms being that he essentially disappears halfway through the movie. But it felt far less obvious this time because he does pop up once or twice towards the end. He gets his death scene and all the rest of it. And I know they used doubles and they used a bit of sort of digital replacement stuff, but none of it's obvious actually, and none of it sort of stuck out for me this time. And he doesn't feel like too much of an absence. When he does kind of, he's in fewer scenes in the second half. It's because Maximus has kind of moving away from him really, and he's becoming more tied up in what Commodus and what's Connie Nielsen's character called Lucilla with all of their drama, and so he probably would have fewer meaningful interactions with Proximo, and it kind of makes sense. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I had, a lingering baggage that I had for the film that
Yeah.
was just unwarranted this time.
Well, I just remember thinking that this film, I mean, obviously we mentioned about Russell Crowe carrying it, but the support cast, when you got Richard Harris, the
Of
word we
course.
like to use a lot, we got the gravitas there. We've got the gravitas with Oliver Reed. We've got the gravitas with, and I cannot pronounce the black actor's name.
Djimon Hounsou. I think it's Djimon
Yes.
or Djimon because
Yes.
it's a French name, right?
Right. He's actually French. Yeah.
yes, he is French, and he had been in Amistad, which
Yes. Yes.
that was kind of his breakout. He was like the young slave in Amistad, which shares a screenwriter with this movie,
And
David
he's also
Franzoni.
he was also in the Jim Sheridan film In America, which I really enjoyed.
Okay,
That was yeah.
yeah. I mean, he has gone on to have like a fascinating career, really, because he's never really broken out and become a leading man. But
No,
he still
no.
pops up to this day just as some sort of wizened old sage or something, that kind of slightly eccentric, peculiar sort of bit part character actor. But he's built sort of a 20-year career. He got an Oscar nomination for Blood Diamond, if I remember
Oh,
rightly.
right. Yes.
Because he was in that with Leo DiCaprio just a few
DiCaprio.
years after this.
Yeah.
But
But
no, he's great, and I love his part in this movie.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and his voice, and Oliver Reed's voice, and Richard Harris's voice, and Russell Crowe's voice, all four of these men, when they speak, there's such an authority behind it. There's such a groundedness. There is, and it's in such a contrast to Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus. It's just, I love there's a great scene where, and again, I hate bringing up Trump, but I couldn't help but see Trump when he's telling Richard Harris, I never had those qualities of temperance and compassion or whatever they were, but I had other qualities. I had ambition, and I had courage, and and I just pictured Trump going, okay, I don't have those other qualities that make for a good president, but I do have qualities that will endure the crowds to me. I have ambition. I have these things, and it's seeing that. That bipolar display of leadership of the one saying, these are the qualities that will endear me to the people, and Richard Harris, these are the qualities that actually make you a good leader. And I really could not help but see American politics today. And I know I don't want to go off on a tangent, but that was the lens I was watching the film through last night.
Oh, I think it's impossible to avoid or ignore, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to watch it through that lens, because what other lens is there? That's just the brain you're using to watch it. So I think that's totally fine, really. But yeah, no, it is. I love Djimon Hounsou's character here, and actually, when I think of Gladiator, the first thing I think about is not necessarily Russell Crowe, but it's those final lines of his character Juba, which is when he's like, "I will see you soon, my friend, but not yet,
Yes,
not
yeah.
yet." When he,
I will see you again, but not yet.
when he buries the little, it's such a haunting, beautiful sentiment, to end the film on. It's like, no,
He's not in the sequel.
I would doubt it, because that would take some explaining. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's set 20, because as far as I understand, I haven't seen it yet. I'm seeing it in a couple of days. The main character played by Paul Mescal is Lucius, is the little boy, is the son, right?
Oh, right.
I think it's him, and Lucilla's son.
Okay.
I believe he's the main character, and he gets kind of wronged in the similar way, and Denzel Washington is almost like an Oliver Reed kind of character who trains him.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Okay.
I've tried not to really read too much about it. I just want to
Yeah.
go in as cold as I can. But
Same.
I think the embargo has just lifted at the time of recording, or in the last 24 hours or so, and so sentiments are starting to trickle through in social media and what have you. And but yeah, I'm trying to ignore them. But that's my understanding. So for Djimon Hounsou's character to be in there, 20, 25 years later, means he's either gone into the same business Oliver Reed's character did, because he was a former
Yeah, well, that's
gladiator.
what I was thinking. He wouldn't be a gladiator anymore.
No,
But he would.
I mean he might
possibly
be. I don't, but I
Yeah.
don't think so. Oh, I mean, let's go into the Academy Awards and just see where it takes us.
Yeah.
So this was
Yeah.
the 73rd Academy Awards, where it came in to it was obviously nominated for Best Picture. It was up against. This was the year where Steven Soderbergh had 2 movies going. It did go in with the most nominations. It went in with 12 nominations and it ended up winning 5. But it was up against 2 Steven Soderbergh movies, Traffic and Erin Brockovich, for which he was nominated for Best Director for both, if I recall. And obviously Julia Roberts ended up winning Best Actress for Erin Brockovich, and Benicio del Toro won Best Supporting Actor for Traffic. But Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was the other big one that year.
Oh, yeah.
That had 10 nominations and was kind of like this sort of sentimental sort of favorite with a lot of people because it was so sort of new and interesting and romantic and exotic and all of those kind of things. But we're not quite at in the days of Parasite just yet. You know, we're still sort of 20 odd, almost 20 years off. Ironically, the year Joaquin Phoenix won, of course. So the big one, and this was obviously at the same time that Harvey Weinstein was at his peak of pushing undeserving movies into Oscar spots, and so Chocolat is there as the other Best Picture winner, and Billy Elliot was around that year as well, and that got.
Oh, okay. Traffic's one I got to revisit. I remember loving that film, and I haven't watched it in years.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time. I love Traffic as well. I think it's a fantastic movie. So the Best Picture winners, the Best Picture nominees were Gladiator, Chocolat, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Erin Brockovich, and Traffic. So Gladiator won there, but Ridley Scott missed out on Best Director, and he has yet to win a Best Director. His last best chance was for The Martian, where he wasn't even nominated. Everybody thought, oh, this could be his year, maybe, but he wasn't even nominated that year. And I think he would have felt pretty hard done by at this point because Steven Soderbergh was nominated twice for Erin Brockovich and Traffic. You know, there is a lot of precedent to suggest he might split the vote between himself. You know, and Soderbergh, I mean, and not win because people love both movies, and you know he might lose out that way. And he's up against Ang Lee, and he's up against Stephen Daldry for Billy Elliot. But it was not to be. Steven Soderbergh did win for Traffic that year, and I don't have a problem with that. I think Traffic's, as we've said, it's a great movie. It tells 4 or 5 different plots simultaneously using different film stocks. The whole Mexican shot stuff.
I remember, if they're in Mexico, they had kind of a brown lens.
Sort of sepia tone, wasn't it? And it was all very grainy photography, and it was all in Spanish. It was. I would like to rewatch that. Maybe we should just revisit that one anyway.
That'd be good. Yeah. I could,
even though it didn't win Best Picture. But Russell Crowe did win Best Actor. He was up against Tom Hanks for Castaway, but other than that, it was a pretty weak year. Javier Bardem for Before Night Falls, which kind of put Javier Bardem on the radar of everybody, and obviously he would win Best Supporting Actor about 6 years later. Ed Harris for Pollock and Jeffrey Rush for Quills. It's like, You know. Julia Roberts. Well, no. So the other categories that it was in was Supporting Actor, and Benicio del Toro won for Traffic, and I think that
Benicio del Toro that's a well-deserved win there. I don't think
it is. It was a very strong category, though. You've got Jeff Bridges for The Contender, where he played the president, and that's a really good movie. I remember that one. Willem Dafoe. Have you not
seen it?
I'm trying to remember who's the lead of The Contender. I know Joan Allen is in it. It's Gary Oldman, Joan Allen, Jeff Bridges, and Christian Slater, and it focuses on a fictional US president and the events surrounding his appointment of a new vice president. It's a really good political kind of comedy thriller. If you haven't seen it, well worth checking out.
Okay, I'll check it out. Yeah.
Albert Finney for Erin Brockovich. I think that was, solid performance. And if I remember right, Albert Finney has never won, or had never. I mean, he's dead now, but has never won. And so, he has never won. And so he was nominated for 5 Oscars, and I think that was the last one. So I think there was some sort of sentimental momentum behind him there. The other nominee that year was Willem Dafoe for Shadow of the Vampire. Now that is a
Ooh,
movie. Have you ever
that was
seen
a good
that?
movie. I have. I
Oh
have. I
wow,
remember
okay.
really liking that film.
Yeah,
Yes.
about the making of
Not
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu, but it
Yeah, with
actually it's really happening. Yes. Yeah. That
yeah, and
was a
that
good
that
film.
Max Schreck, who is the actor that plays Count Orlok in Nosferatu, is really a vampire.
Yes.
And that John Malkovich, who plays Murnau, the director of Nosferatu, has to kind of placate him and keep feeding him, on the down low. Yeah, I need to revisit that. I haven't seen that in a long time. I remember seeing it when it
Same.
came out.
Same. Yeah. Same.
That's a really
That's a
fun kind
good.
of
Yeah.
vampire movie. Have you ever seen Nosferatu?
I don't think I have. No, I've seen Shadow the Vampire, but I've never seen Nosferatu.
Maybe we should sit down, maybe next Halloween or something, and
Next
watch
Halloween.
both
Yeah.
of those together
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
and
put
do
that
an
on the
episode.
docket.
Do an
Let's put that
episode
on
of
the
that. We could
docket.
even watch the Klaus Kinski version of Nosferatu as well from the
Oh yeah.
70s, the Werner Herzog one.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a new Nosferatu coming out this Christmas.
I heard that.
Robert
Yeah.
Eggers, who did The Lighthouse and The Northman. Anyway, we digress. So, so Benicio del Toro won out over Joaquin Phoenix in what looks like a very hotly contested category. It was nominated, as I said, in 12 categories. So it was nominated for all of the big sort of technical awards, like the score. The Hans Zimmer score, I think, is one of his best ones, even though there are bits of The Rock in there, and I think there are bits of Pirates of the Caribbean in there as well. You can, as they go along, you're like, oh, I recognize that bit. You've used that bit before, and you will use that bit again. And it was up for Best Original Screenplay.
Okay.
It's funny that a movie like that is considered an original screenplay. Often when you do, obviously it is, but when you see a movie that on that scale, that size, it's almost always based on a book, but not this time.
Not this time.
The other things that it won were Best Sound, and it's like, fair enough. You'd think, okay, but you'd have thought maybe cinematography, editing, and all of those kind of things, it would have probably swept the ball with that, but it didn't. And then it won Best Visual Effects. And I think that's very telling of the moment. This was back in the day, the visual effects wasn't considered that important a category. It was up against The Perfect Storm and Hollow Man. But it won Best Visual Effects, and I think that's very telling. I think it's deserved, as we have already said. But I think it's very telling of the moment. This was a real, hot moment for CGI. I think the problems came in sort of in the 2000s, like in the following decade, where it almost felt like the technology didn't really advance any further, but what they were pushing it to achieve was going much further. Sort of mythical beasts and all of these big things. Obviously you got like the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter movies came out during that time, and the Star Wars sequels. There were all of these real pushes, these real big franchises, but it did feel that everybody was getting into that game, and for unless you really knew what you were doing, the technology wasn't quite there. So for every Lord of the Rings movie, there was like a Clash of the Titans movie, or just something really kind of subpar.
Even what Jackson did after Lord of the Rings with The Hobbit, I think he just destroyed those movies with a CGI fest that was ridiculous. I remember watching that first film and thinking, this is ridiculous. I feel like I'm watching a video game. This is not what I signed up for. I was so mad. I don't even think I've watched the last of the trilogy. It's like I just
the Hobbit
checked
movies.
out. Yeah, I just checked out. Lord of the Rings are one of my favorite films of all time. And The Hobbit, I just don't even go back and revisit. Well, James, I think after this love fest we've given Gladiator, I think our usual questions of does it deserve its place? Does Gladiator deserve its place in Oscar history? Does it stand the test of time? It goes without saying. This is one of the greatest films ever made, and it definitely stands the test of time and deserves its place.
I think, I'm not sure I'll go quite as far as to say it's one of the greatest films of all time. But I think it certainly deserved winning Best Picture. It was up against some stiff competition. I think if either Traffic or Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon had won, you could also say, sure, they deserved it too. But I have certainly no problem with Gladiator winning. As we've said, it was a product of its time technically, but it was also at the peak of that. And I think that it endures surprisingly well. I must admit, I was watching it on a battered old DVD. Maybe seeing it in 4K might do it some favors, but might not, might expose a few of the cracks. It remains to be seen. But obviously it's still in the public consciousness because the sequel is coming out this week. So it has certainly stood the test of time from a brand point of view, if nothing else. But no, I think it's great fun. I thoroughly enjoyed it. There weren't really any sort of little technical niggles or anything like that. And as we've said, Russell Crowe is just phenomenal in it. It is his signature performance. And if he drops dead tomorrow, please don't, Russell, we love you. But he will always be Maximus from Gladiator, and that's not a problem.
Absolutely. Well, that's what James and I think about Gladiator and Russell Crowe's role in it, but maybe you have a different opinion. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment box below. James?
Yeah, absolutely. Has it's aged as well? Do you have a strong feeling that either Crouching Tiger or Traffic or even either of the others? Are you a big Chocolat fan? Do let us know. And if you've seen the sequel, spoiler free until next week. But let us know in the comments.
Till next episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.